Welcome back, everyone. Today, we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating stories in the world of rare coins, the 1985 D1 cent, a coin that has captured the imaginations of collectors and numismatists around the world due to its extraordinary value and the mysterious errors that make it a potential treasure worth millions, specifically estimated at around $31 million. A figure that might seem almost unbelievable for a coin whose face value is only 1 cent, but when we explore the history, production, quirks, and the rare mistakes associated with this particular minting, the reasoning behind such a high valuation becomes astonishingly clear, and the story is both intricate and fascinating, showing how small production anomalies can turn an ordinary coin into a multi-million-dollar collectible, and this coin is no exception, as it combines multiple factors that make it highly sought after by collectors who are always on the lookout for errors, rarity, and provenance, and the 1985 D1 cent is particularly intriguing because it originates from the Denver Mint, known for producing large quantities of pennies but occasionally experiencing issues in their minting processes that inadvertently create extremely rare specimens, and the errors in question with this coin are not superficial or minor. They include some of the most sought-after minting mistakes in the numismatic community, such as die cracks, off-center strikes, double die impressions, and the infamous broad strikes, all of which contribute to the coin's extreme value, and each of these errors has its own story and mechanism that leads to these highly prized anomalies. For instance, die cracks occur when the steel dies used to strike the coins develop fractures over time, and when these cracked dies strike a blank planchet, they leave raised lines on the coin's surface, lines that can vary from barely noticeable to dramatically obvious. And in the case of the 1985 D1 cent, there have been reports of exceptionally prominent die cracks that form intricate patterns across the coin's obverse and reverse, making each piece unique, and this uniqueness is a key factor in numismatic valuation because collectors prize coins that differ from the mass-produced standard, and off-center strikes, another major error found in certain 1985 D1 cents, occur when the coin blank is not properly aligned within the coining press, causing the design to be partially or significantly off the center, sometimes leaving large portions of the metal blank and resulting in coins that are immediately eye-catching due to their unusual appearance, and these off-center strikes are particularly valued when the misalignment is severe but still retains most of the coin's design, which demonstrates a perfect balance between error magnitude and aesthetic appeal, and double die impressions. Yet another category of errors affecting certain 1985 D pennies arise when a die receives an additional, slightly misaligned impression during its creation process, producing coins where letters, numbers, or design features appear doubled, and these double die errors are historically some of the most famous in American numismatics, as exemplified by the 1955 double die cent, and the 1985 D, while not as widely known, has its own rare examples that feature subtle yet unmistakable doubling that experts and collectors immediately recognize as extremely valuable, and broad strike errors, although less common, occur when the retaining collar that holds the coin blank in place during striking malfunctions or is missing entirely, allowing the metal to flow outward and produce a coin that is wider and thinner than normal, and the 1985 D1 cent occasionally appears in this form, creating coins that are visually striking and immediately distinguishable from regular pennies. And the combination of all these potential errors in a single coin, or even in coins from the same year and mint, contributes to a frenzy of interest and speculation in the collector community, as each coin becomes a small, tangible puzzle of minting history. And beyond these technical aspects, the market dynamics of rarity and demand play a crucial role in inflating the value to millions, as collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums for a coin that is verified to be one of only a few known specimens with such significant errors, and the provenance of a coin, meaning its documented ownership history and verification by reputable grading services such as PCGS or NGC, further amplifies its desirability and, consequently, its market price, and in some cases, a 1985 D penny with verified die cracks, double die features, or other major minting anomalies can fetch prices that seem disproportionate to its material worth, which is technically just a small piece of copper-plated zinc, but the historical and collectible significance turns it into a multi-million-dollar asset, and collectors and investors alike are drawn not just by the aesthetic and technical rarity but by the excitement and prestige of owning a coin that embodies a moment of imperfection frozen in time, a snapshot of human error and mechanical idiosyncrasy from one of the busiest mints in the United States, and the possibilities for discovering more of these coins add another layer of intrigue, as mint records suggest that while the majority of pennies were struck without incident, the precise number of coins exhibiting these significant errors is incredibly low, creating a scenario where finding a single example could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and the excitement extends beyond traditional numismatists, as media reports and social media buzz around these coins can sometimes generate speculative hype, drawing in casual collectors and investors who are fascinated by the idea that a coin could be worth millions. And this phenomenon itself can influence prices, as the perceived value and rarity become intertwined with public interest and market psychology, creating an ecosystem in which coins like the 1985 D1 cent are not merely currency but artifacts of historical and mechanical significance, encapsulating the story of production errors, minting quirks, and human oversight, and in addition to the more technical errors like die cracks, off-center strikes, double dies, and broad strikes, there are also subtler anomalies that make certain 1985 D pennies collectible, such as die deterioration, doubling, repunched mint marks, or weak strikes that, while less obvious, are still prized in high grades, and each minor anomaly tells a story about the minting process, including the wear of dies, adjustments made to presses, and the occasional misfeed of planchets, all of which add layers of complexity and intrigue for collectors who enjoy studying every minute detail of a coin's surface. And it is precisely this combination of dramatic errors and minor anomalies that creates a spectrum of collectability, where a coin can be valued anywhere from a few $100s for a minor mistrike to tens of millions for an extraordinary specimen with multiple major errors, and grading plays an essential role here, as coins evaluated by professional services receive numerical grades reflecting condition, from circulated wear to pristine, uncirculated mint state, and a high-grade 1985 D penny with one or more of these errors can command prices that are exponentially higher than lower grade examples, with the grading not only ensuring authenticity but also providing a benchmark that buyers and sellers use to negotiate these massive valuations. And historical context also adds weight to the story of the 1985 D penny, as the mid-1980s were a period of significant production at the Denver Mint, with billions of pennies struck annually, making the appearance of errors like those seen in this coin all the more remarkable due to the sheer improbability of these mistakes in such a high volume environment, and because the minting equipment and quality control procedures were highly developed but not infallible. The survival of these errors in collectible condition is a testament to chance, luck, and the passage of time, since many erroneous coins would have been circulated and lost, leaving only a handful available for discovery decades later, which adds a sense of adventure and treasure hunting to the pursuit of these coins, attracting collectors who relish the idea that a seemingly ordinary coin from pocket change could turn out to be an extraordinary and extremely valuable artifact. And in exploring the 1985 D penny, one must also consider the chemistry and metallurgy of the coin, as it is composed primarily of copper-plated zinc, and factors such as planchet quality, striking pressure, and die hardness all influence the likelihood and appearance of errors, and experts have noted that variations in these parameters can lead to subtle but recognizable anomalies. Next. Today, because what we are about to talk about is one of those unbelievable stories hiding in plain sight, a story that could be sitting quietly in a jar of old change, tucked away in a drawer, or even forgotten in a pocket, and yet carries a legend that has shaken the world of coin collectors and everyday people alike. Today we are diving deep into the fascinating mystery of the 1982 D1 cent coin, a penny that many people would normally overlook, ignore, or even spend without a second thought, yet under very rare circumstances has been rumored, discussed, and passionately debated as being worth as much as $11 million, and yes, you heard that correctly, $11 million for a single penny, a coin originally meant to be worth just 1 cent, and in this story we are going to explore exactly how such a jaw-dropping valuation could even be possible, what errors and mistakes are believed to exist on these coins, how the unusual circumstances of the year 1982 created a perfect storm of minting chaos, metal transitions, die varieties, and human error, and why collectors believe that somewhere out there may still be undiscovered examples that could change someone's life forever, because the year 1982 stands out in United States coinage history as one of the most complicated and confusing years for the Lincoln cent. A year when the U.S. Mint transitioned from primarily copper pennies to zinc-based pennies with a thin copper coating, and this change alone opened the door to countless mistakes, mismatches, and anomalies that still puzzle experts today, especially when it comes to the Denver Mint, which struck hundreds of millions of pennies during that year under intense pressure to adapt to new materials, new dyes, new production methods, and rising metal costs, and when you combine speed, mass production, material shortages, and human oversight, you get the ideal conditions for rare and extraordinary errors to slip through unnoticed, and the 1982 D1 cent is right at the center of this storm, because unlike many other years, 1982 did not have a single uniform composition. Instead it had multiple varieties, both copper and zinc, both large date and small date styles, and coins struck at different times during the transition. And while the Philadelphia Mint produced both copper and zinc pennies in 1982, the Denver Mint officially was not supposed to produce copper pennies that year, yet collectors have long suspected that a very small number of copper planchets may have remained in the system and were accidentally struck with Denver dies, creating one of the rarest and most valuable modern pennies imaginable, because if a genuine 1982 D penny were struck on a 95% copper planchet instead of the standard zinc core, it would represent a transitional error of historic proportions, something that technically should not exist, and it is this possibility that fuels the legendary $11 million valuation. Because rarity in the coin world is not just about age, it is about impossibility, and a coin that was never meant to exist but does is often more valuable than coins that are simply old, and the 1982 D copper penny sits firmly in that category of near impossible anomalies, but the story does not end there, because composition is only one part of the mystery. Another layer comes from the confusing date styles used in 1982, where the mint employed both large date and small date punches, sometimes switching between them without clear records, creating additional varieties that collectors still catalog today, and some of these varieties are far scarcer than others, especially when paired with unusual metal compositions or striking characteristics, and when you factor in errors like double strikes, off-center strikes, broad strikes, die cracks, die clashes, weak strikes, and even wrong planchet errors, the number of potential high-value combinations grows exponentially, and collectors believe that somewhere among these combinations could be an ultra-rare example that ticks every box, a Denver minted penny, dated 1982, struck on a copper planchet, with a rare date style, and possibly accompanied by an additional dramatic mint error, which would elevate it from a rare coin to a once-in-a-generation discovery, and that is where the $11 million figure begins to make sense, because value in numismatics is not just assigned arbitrarily, it is driven by demand, scarcity, condition, and historical significance, and the idea of a confirmed 1982 D copper penny in pristine condition would ignite intense bidding wars among elite collectors, museums, and private investors, especially in a market where record-breaking prices for error coins have become more common over the last few decades, and the psychology behind this fascination is simple. People love the idea that extraordinary wealth could come from ordinary places, and the penny represents the most ordinary coin of all, making its transformation into a multi-million-dollar artifact even more powerful. And when stories surface of other pennies selling for hundreds of thousands or even millions due to errors, such as the famous 1943 copper penny or the 1955 double-die cent, it reinforces the belief that lightning can strike again, and perhaps has already struck in 1982, just waiting to be discovered. But what truly sets the 1982 penny apart is the sheer complexity of its production. Year, because no other year in modern U.S. coinage involved such a rapid and widespread shift in composition, and the mint did not halt production to clean out old planchets or fully standardize processes. Instead, they adapted on the fly, which means old copper blanks could have been mixed with new zinc blanks, especially during the early part of the year. And although official records state that Denver switched entirely to zinc, real-world minting floors are chaotic environments, and mistakes do happen, sometimes without being noticed for decades, and this is why collectors test 1982 pennies obsessively, weighing them carefully, listening for the sound they make when dropped, examining their color, and even using advanced metallurgical analysis to determine composition, because a copper penny weighs approximately 3.11 grams, while a zinc penny weighs around 2.5 grams, and that difference is critical, and a genuine 1982 penny weighing closer to 3.11 grams would immediately raise eyebrows and send shockwaves through the numismatic community, especially if authenticated by a reputable grading service, and yet composition alone is not enough to reach such a high valuation. Condition plays a massive role as well, because a coin in circulated condition with scratches, wear, or corrosion would be far less valuable than one preserved in mint state. And this is where the idea of an $11 million penny becomes even more extraordinary, because it assumes not only that the coin exists, but that it survived decades of circulation or storage without significant damage, which is rare but not impossible, especially if it was saved early by someone who noticed something unusual about it, or simply set aside rolls of pennies from that era and forgot about them. And beyond composition and condition, there is also the possibility of dramatic striking errors that could push value even higher, such as a double denomination strike where a penny is struck on a planchet intended for another coin, or a mule error where mismatched dies are used, or a major off-center strike combined with the wrong metal composition, because the more layers of rarity a coin has, the more desirable it becomes, and the 1982 penny offers a unique playground for such anomalies because of how many variables were in flux at the time, and even subtle errors like double dies, where the design elements appear doubled due to misalignment during die creation, can dramatically increase value, especially when combined with an already rare base coin. And while most double dies are visible under magnification, some are extremely subtle and require expert analysis, meaning that some valuable coins could still be hiding in plain sight, overlooked by people who do not know what to look for, and this fuels the ongoing hunt, the endless checking of old penny rolls, the careful weighing of coins, the heated debates on collector forums, and the constant hope that the next big discovery is just one coin away. And when people hear that a penny could be worth $11 million, it captures the imagination in a way few other collectibles can, because it represents a bridge between everyday life and extraordinary fortune, and it reminds us that history is not just preserved in museums, but in our pockets, our drawers, our piggy banks, and our memories. Last today, because what we are about to explore sounds like a simple story about a penny but quickly turns into one of the most fascinating and controversial treasure hunts in modern American coin collecting, a story that has collectors checking their pockets, old jars, inherited collections, and forgotten drawers with renewed excitement, because today we are diving deep into the legendary 1973 1-cent coin, a humble Lincoln penny that under certain extraordinary circumstances is rumored to be worth as much as $8 million, and before you dismiss that number as internet fantasy or clickbait, Stay with me because this value is not tied to the ordinary 1973 D pennies that were struck by the hundreds of millions and spent on candy, newspapers, and gas station change, but instead to a tiny number of coins that may have slipped through the cracks of the United States Mint due to a perfect storm of errors, mistakes, transitional confusion, and minting anomalies that together created what many consider one of the most intriguing penny mysteries of the 20th century. And as we move through this story, we will break down the historical background of the 1973 D cent, the minting process of the early 1970s, the specific errors and mistakes that elevate a common coin into a multi-million-dollar prize, the realistic possibilities of these coins still existing undiscovered, and why collectors and experts continue to argue about their legitimacy and potential value even decades later, all while keeping this grounded in the reality of how rare error coins are born and how extraordinary circumstances can turn 1 cent into a life-changing fortune. So let's begin at the beginning by traveling back to the early 1970s, a turbulent and transitional period for the United States Mint and the American economy as a whole, because the context of the era is essential to understanding how such a valuable mistake could even be possible. During this time, inflation was rising. Metal prices were volatile, and the government was under pressure to reduce the cost of producing coinage, particularly the Lincoln cent, which since 1909 had traditionally been struck in a bronze alloy composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. But by the early 1970s the price of copper was climbing rapidly, making the intrinsic metal value of the cent dangerously close to or even exceeding its face value, and this created enormous logistical and financial concerns for the mint, leading to experiments, studies, and contingency planning about alternative metals and compositions, most famously culminating in the 1943 steel cents during World War II and later in the major 1982 transition from bronze to copper-plated zinc cents. But what many people don't realize is that the mint was testing alternative compositions and dealing with leftover planchets and dies long before 1982, including during the early 1970s, and this is where the 1973 D penny begins to stand out. Because while most 1973 D cents were struck on standard bronze planchets at the Denver Mint, rumors and collector lore persist that a very small number may have been struck on experimental, leftover, or incorrect planchets, possibly including aluminum, steel, or even earlier bronze alloy blends not officially authorized for circulation. And if such a coin exists and can be authenticated, it would immediately place it among the most valuable pennies ever known. But composition alone is only part of the story, because errors rarely come in isolation, and the 1973 D cent's potential $8 million valuation is tied not to one single mistake but to a convergence of multiple minting errors that would have required an almost unbelievable chain of events inside the Denver Mint. Events that nevertheless have precedent when we examine other famous error coins like the 1943 bronze cent or the 1944 steel cent, which were never supposed to exist but undeniably do, proving that even under strict controls, mistakes can and do happen. So to understand the specific errors associated with the legendary 1973 D cent, we need to break down the minting process itself, because every coin begins as a blank piece of metal known as a planchet. These planchets are punched from metal strips, cleaned, annealed, washed, and then fed into presses where dies strike the designs onto them under immense pressure. And at every stage there is room for error, from incorrect metal composition to misaligned dies, from improper annealing to accidental die swaps, and in high-volume facilities like the Denver Mint, which produced over 232 million Lincoln cents in 1973 alone, the sheer scale of production increases the statistical likelihood that a small number of anomalies could escape detection, particularly if they resemble normal coins at a glance. And one of the most talked about possibilities for the $8 million 1973 D cent is that it was struck on an aluminum planchet, a metal the mint seriously considered for cents during the early 1970s due to rising copper costs. In fact, experimental aluminum cents dated 1974 are well documented, with a small number produced and distributed to members of Congress for evaluation, but these were never officially released into circulation and most were recalled. However, history shows that experimental pieces can slip out unintentionally, as evidenced by examples that have surfaced in private hands, and if an aluminum planchet from these experiments somehow made its way into the Denver Mint's production line in late 1973, it could have been struck with 1973 D dies, creating a coin that was never supposed to exist, a coin with the correct date and mint mark but the wrong metal, and such a piece would be extraordinarily light, non-magnetic, and visually distinct from a normal bronze cent, immediately raising alarms among experts but also commanding an astronomical price if authenticated, because it would represent a previously unknown transitional or experimental error. But aluminum is not the only metal under consideration. Another theory involves the possibility of a 1973 D cent struck on a steel planchet, similar to the famous 1943 steel cents but without the zinc coating or with a different alloy entirely. And while the mint had not officially produced steel cents since World War II, leftover planchets, test materials, or even foreign coin blanks could theoretically have been present in the mint environment, and history again supports this possibility when we consider off-metal errors involving foreign planchets that have been confirmed across multiple denominations and decades. So a steel or other off-metal 1973 D cent would be a dramatic and highly valuable error, especially if it exhibited additional anomalies. And that brings us to the second major category of errors associated with the $8 million valuation, die errors, because even if a coin were struck on an incorrect planchet, its value would be amplified significantly if the dies themselves were flawed, and collectors have long speculated about 1973 D cents with doubled dies, repunched mint marks, die clashes, or misaligned die strikes. But the truly legendary examples would involve extreme doubled dies, where the date, lettering, and Lincoln's features show dramatic separation visible to the naked eye, not just under magnification, and while minor doubling is common and usually worth little, major doubled dies are rare and highly sought after, as demonstrated by coins like the 1955 double die cent, which sells for tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on condition. Now imagine combining a dramatic double die with an off-metal planchet and possibly an incorrect weight or composition. The result would be a numismatic unicorn, a coin that checks multiple boxes of rarity at once. And this is where the hypothetical $8 million price tag begins to make sense, because collectors and investors are not just paying for a mistake, they are paying for a story, a convergence of errors that is statistically almost impossible to replicate. And condition plays a massive role here as well, because error coins are often discovered in circulation after years of wear. But if a 1973 D off-metal error somehow survived in high mint state condition, with sharp details, minimal contact marks, and original surfaces, its value would skyrocket even further, especially if it could be traced back to an original mint source or accompanied by compelling provenance.